Welcome, my friends. My name is Joe Peprocki. I'm the National Consultant for Faith Formation from Loyola Press, and welcome to this webinar with Jean Heaton called Helping Families Recover from Addiction. And I will have the pleasure of introducing Jean, who you see on your screen already, but I'll introduce her formally in just a moment or two. But I wanted to thank all of you for joining us. Let you know that you are welcome to use the chat feature either to introduce yourself to whatever extent you'd like. Some people prefer a little more anonymity in a gathering like this, so you can put your initials and what part of the country you're from rather than your name and what city, or whatever you'd like, to whatever extent you'd like to share. But we have people from all over the world joining us because there are no boundaries on an issue like this, and we're so thankful to have Jean help us today. So please do use the chat. Feel free to use the Q&A as well. Then we will have a Q&A part of this a little bit later on. So if you have questions at any point, feel free to put those into the chat, and Denise is going to be sifting through those to make sure that we get the best questions up for Jean to answer. And the recording will be available from this on ignatianspirituality.com in just a few days. Let me tell you about Jean and then introduce her to you. Jean Heaton is a blogger, writer, speaker, teacher, and a workshop and retreat leader. Both her husband and son are in long-term recovery, and we thank you, Jean, and your husband and son for your bravery in sharing that with us. And she has worked her own 12-step program for those affected by the addictions of others, and she shares her experience, strength, and hope for others at www.jeanheaton.com. Hi, Jean. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good after the initial snafu with technology, but
I
I'm fine.
know. But we're here now and everything is fine. So, we're ready to get rolling here. And I think maybe the best way for us to get started is, Jean, tell us a little bit about your book, Helping Families Recover from Addiction.
Well, I wrote what I couldn't find. When we first started out on this journey, I went to 12-step meetings where they talked about the God of my understanding and a power greater than myself. And I really felt like our problem was a spiritual problem, and I wanted to be sure that I didn't do any harm because harm had already been done. And so I kind of did a deep dive on research on learning about the Catholic Church's connection to 12-step programs.
Mhm.
And that's when I learned about Father Ed Dowling from the Jesuits, which at the time I didn't know who the Jesuits were. I didn't know who Ignatius of Loyola was. And so it was a long journey of finding these connections and starting to learn about the tools of recovery that have been available to us since the 1500s. And so it was kind of a journey into healing in a way that I think God led me.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that journey with us. As we've said a couple of times already, this is a challenge that many families face, and many people don't know where to turn or where to begin. And even in your example, you were looking for something a little more spiritual than what you were finding. And with great ingenuity, you just said, well, I'll write the book then that I've been looking for. And so we thank you for doing that, and encourage people to check out Jean's book. There's a QR code on the screen right now. If you'd like to scan that, it'll take you right to where you can get that book. But we obviously, in a situation where families are dealing with addiction, we need help. And so in this field, we talk about intervention. We need an intervention from outside of ourselves to help us through. And so think of Jean's book as part of an ongoing intervention that is available to you, your family, and those who are dealing with addiction. Um, we're very excited for you, Jean, that your book has been awarded several times. The 2021 Catholic Media Association Book Awards gave it second place for pastoral ministry and parish life, also second place for first-time author of a book, and honorable mention, healing and self-help. And then also the 2021 Illumination Book Awards gave it a gold medal for health and wellness. So congratulations on that, Jean. How does that feel?
It feels pretty good. I think it's such an important topic that's not talked about a lot. So, hoping that these awards helps it to find the hands that need it.
Absolutely. And let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the meat of our topic today. And you thought it was very important for us to begin with the Serenity Prayer. So tell us your thoughts about that. And then please, whenever you're ready, go ahead and lead us in the prayer.
Okay. I think the Serenity Prayer can seem cliche, but it's not. It's very important because it starts right at the beginning of drawing your attention to what belongs to me and what belongs to God.
Okay.
We are powerless over our loved ones, so that belongs to God. So the Serenity Prayer just helps us to start being aware of what belongs where. So let's begin in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Thank you, Jean. A powerful prayer. And I know many people who pray that, whether they have an addiction or not, just, the wisdom in that prayer and the power in it is something for all of us to benefit from. So now, Jean, in your experience, you've been reaching out to other families to help them take these steps that you and your family have been taking. Tell us a little bit about where do people begin when working with families, and what are some things that families need to know or that people need to know before they start working with families?
Okay, well, the first thing is most families have been suffering in silence for a long time. It really, at least in my case, it took a lot to go wrong before I was willing to reach out for help. There's a 12-step saying we are as sick as our secrets. And that's very, very true. So know that when people come to you, they are fragile, and they may be angry at their loved ones, but they don't want you to be. They'll do anything to protect them. I think that there's a psychologist named Carl Rogers who talks about unconditional positive regard. And what he means by that is that when you hear someone's story, I always say don't flinch, because they're very, very fragile and they are alarmed themselves. And you just have to receive what they say with loving care and kindness. And then let's see. It just takes a lot of courage. It takes a whole lot of courage. So know that when you receive people.
So, it's good for anyone who's working with families then to take a step back and to get an idea of the big picture. So help us with that. What do you mean by getting the big picture?
Well, a lot of people think that, just the bad behavior of their loved ones is the problem. And it's not, that's not what the problem is. The big picture tells us the why. It goes beyond just the things that you see in your life. I always say that our actions are the truth tellers of our beliefs. If I say that I believe that God can take care of my loved one and I'm not letting go of them, then I have some work to do. So that's the big picture. I'm not trusting God with my loved one. If I'm not feeling okay enough about myself to ask for what I want, then my actions are telling me that I don't feel okay in my own skin. And if I can't accept others as God would accept them as his children, then I'm not seeing others through the eyes of God. So the big picture is important. Um, it's important to understand what the real problem is, to find the tools that we have, and to know how we use the steps and the exercises to recover. And if you have that big picture in mind, you'll understand all those little steps along the way. They'll make sense.
Yeah, Jean, and I know from my own limited experience of learning about 12 steps, I remember being very surprised when I heard it said from, if I got this right, from Alcoholics Anonymous, that it's often said that alcohol is about 10% of the problem and 90% of it is honesty. Is that what you mean when you talk about understanding the problem?
Yeah, the problem. I mean, there is a saying in Alcoholics Anonymous that those who don't recover are incapable of being honest with themselves.
Okay.
I think that's true. But no, I think the alcohol is just the symptom. For the families, the control and the trying to fix things, that's the problem for the family members. But there's a lot underneath it all that still has to be faced before you get to the root problem.
And I think that's what you're talking about here when you go a little further into understanding the problem. You talk about that
Right.
drugs and alcohol being a symptom. So tell us more about understanding the problem.
Okay, so the alcoholic, when they feel uncomfortable in themselves, will find alcohol or drugs to numb those feelings of dis-ease. The family members will get busy in somebody else's business to calm that feeling of dis-ease. But the real problem is much deeper than that. Those are just those are just symptoms that cause additional problems. And they do cause a host of problems in the family. But if you don't get to the root of it, then there's still that underneath layer of dis-ease that makes everybody miserable in the family.
And as we talk about understanding the problem, you've identified what you refer to as the three A's, paying attention to these three A's. So if you can expound on these, you talk about awareness, acceptance, and action.
Right. Well, I think that the real problem of addiction, which I probably didn't allude to in the last slide, is dis-ease, disorder, and disconnection in our relationships to God, self, and others. So what I work with a lot are those three relationships. So you use those three A's in every relationship category between God, self, and others. Those three A's are used to first become aware of what is. You know, what do I really believe about God? What do I really believe about myself? How do I really feel about others? And then once I kind of take that inventory, I accept that truth, because we live in denial a lot, or we live in a fantasy a lot. But, you know, our actions, the real truth teller, will tell me whether or not I really do believe that God can handle the situation that I'm in. Because if I'm not trusting him with it, then I don't believe he can handle it. I am being the God of my understanding. And that's a pretty dangerous place to be. So each of those relationship categories, you will go through awareness, acceptance, and then you'll act to make it be different.
And I would imagine that it takes a lot of courage to be that honest with oneself. You know, I think for every person who follows a Christian belief, you know, we know that there are a call for us to repent, especially for many Christians during the season of Lent. We talk about repentance and examining ourselves and doing an examination of conscience. And it is so easy for us to fall into that denial. And I would imagine that that's even more exacerbated in a situation of addiction. Would you say that's true?
Oh yes, I mean, it's a frightening thing to face. I mean, it's makes sense that you would want to let that be the last possible problem that you're facing. I mean, in our own case, I denied the problem for a really long time. I passed it off as so many other things because it was too frightening to imagine that we were facing an addiction. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, and you mentioned in one of your earlier slides too, you used the word stigma, and I think people are very hesitant to use certain words like addiction, alcoholism, and so on because of the stigma that's attached to it. That, that means that you're a bad person, that you've got a problem that can't be fixed, and so on. There's so much stigma attached to that. So it's very difficult to come to this moment of acceptance, and yet we're all called to do this. It's just heightened, obviously, in a situation with addiction. So Jean, in your book, you spend a lot of time sharing stories. And even in our conversations leading up to this, you had some stories you shared, and we're at Loyola Press, we're firm believers in the power of stories, and I think it's a big part of the 12-step process.
Mhm.
And so you have a few categories coming up here, which you have some personal stories to share. And the first one is talking about healing my image of God and healing my relationship with God. In the 12 steps, we talk about surrendering to a higher power. Of course, in Christianity, we will simply name that higher power God. Um, Tell us about this notion of healing my image of God, and then share your story with us.
Okay. In my 12-step program, step 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So it starts with came to believe, which means it's a process. I already believed in God. I've believed in God for my entire life. And for the first year, I just checked that one off the list. I believe in God. So that's not a step that applies to me, I thought. But over time, what I've learned is that the image that I held of God needed healing.
Mm,
And it has been one of those things where over time I've realized how much healing it needed. So I went with my husband in the last 6 months to an open AA speaker meeting. And it was a regular speaker meeting, which is where they choose a person who shares their experience, strength, and hope. Now, those are the kind of the three acts of a play. Their experience is what happened.
okay.
Um, their strength is what courage they had to make a change where things would be different. And then their strength is, and their hope is how things are now. And so it's this person got up and told their story, and I don't really remember that much about it. But what I remember is after it had finished, they they start this process where they go through the chip system. They have chips that will
Right.
honor a certain amount of continuous days of sobriety. But they start with the desire chip. And the desire chip is if you've had a drink out in the parking lot and you've come inside and you want a desire chip, you get a desire chip.
Okay.
And so as I've taken out my phone and started looking to see if I'd missed any calls or messages, the room erupts, and people are on their feet, they're cheering, they're fist bumping. And I looked at my husband and I said, "What in the world?" And he said, "It's MJ. And she's got a desire chip." And I've seen other people get desire chips, and not for this kind of applause and standing on your feet. And he said she's got enough desire chips to fill a shoebox.
Mm,
And so I thought, here's this young woman, probably in her 20s, who's got enough chips that she can fill a shoebox,
yeah.
and she's failed over and over and over again. And where else on earth would you be cheered for this except for in this room?
Mm,
And it was so touching. that immediately it was like puzzle pieces coming together. It was the father in the return of the prodigal son,
Hmm.
the open arms receiving. It was Jesus standing with the adulteress. It was leaving 99 sheep and going after that one,
Yeah.
and on and on and on. And it just had this profound effect on who I saw God to be. I mean, it was living, breathing in this room image of God for me. And it changed the way I saw him. And honestly, it changed the way I saw me as his child. Um, so that was a one profound story on how there was tremendous healing with my image of God.
I think that's so important, Jean. Thank you for sharing that very powerful story. It's so important that you talk about healing my image of God, healing my relationship. That you said that you believed in God already, so you almost felt like, oh, check that one off. I can just move on. But what needed healing was your image of God, your relationship with God. And so it's not enough for us to say, well, I have a belief in God. I acknowledge the existence of a supreme being, or whatever we want to call God, a higher power.
Right.
But to take it to the next step and to really enflesh that image of God in the way that your story did, that you were able to associate it with, the prodigal son story, and the good shepherd going after the sheep and so on, that you had never imagined God in this way before. So your whole concept of God was just sort of exploded, right? And
Right.
and entered a new realm.
Right. Right. Yes.
Very
Yeah,
powerful.
I can
Go
feel
ahead.
myself be accepted with this new idea. And it's not new. I've read it in scripture. But when I saw it in a room full of people in action, it was
Yeah.
just changing.
And you talk about entering a climate where the values and approaches that we normally expect are turned upside down. And
Exactly.
and so we might think in a regular setting, if someone failed so many times and says, "I want to try again," that there'd be a lot of eye rolling. Oh
Right.
yeah, here we go again. But here everyone's standing and applauding and saying, "All right, this time let's we're all together, we're together
Right.
with you." And that is the power. To me, that's the power of the 12-step approach, eventually reaching through to people. She may have that shoebox full of the chips, but all it's going to take is that one more chip for her to finally turn that corner, and that's what everyone is cheering for. That really is it just makes me think of the Beatitudes turning the world upside down. It's
Right.
a total reversal of our expectations. uh, Jean, you talk also about, and you actually touched on this a little bit in the last story, about healing your relationship with God and healing your image of God, that it caused you to look at the image, your image of yourself. And certainly in a 12-step program, everyone involved is invited and challenged to take a close look at themselves. So tell us your thoughts about this notion of healing my image of self, and then you have another story to share with us.
Sure. Well, I one of the things that we learn in the 12-step world is that most of us come from dysfunctional families. I would even venture to say that most people, I think, nobody knows how to function normally when we come into this world. So dysfunctional isn't all that uncommon. It's just the level to which the dysfunction is. But
Right.
anyway, so one of the things we have to do is kind of separate ourselves a bit from the family, not, like in terms of legal separation, but just pull yourself aside to examine yourself. And one of the things that we learn in the 12-step world is that few of us have good boundaries. And we know that, I mean, God gives us boundaries in the 10 commandments. And so we need good boundaries to keep ourselves and others safe. And so um, the story that I have about healing the image of myself is I have two dogs, and one is a standard poodle, and the other is a long-haired Dachshund. And I walk those dogs every morning. And the poodle is really my husband's dog. He's it for me. He loses his mind a bit when he sees other dogs. And so we started trying to train him to get him to calm down. And one morning I was walking him and I saw this big black lab coming our direction. And so I got his attention by giving him treats. And I thought, well, I'll even cross to the other side of the road to try to keep, the distraction away. And we made it all the way home, and I was so proud. And we get inside of the garage where I always unleash them and let them walk inside by themselves. And this day, as soon as I get the last leash off, the big dog, the standard poodle, runs straight towards the street, which he's never done before.
Oh my.
And so did the little dog. And I look up, and the man with the big black lab has walked to my yard, is stopped at my sidewalk, and has let his dog off leash. And my big dog is running into the street. My little dog, who's 15 years old, she is being jumped over, and I'm concerned about her back. And the fella is standing there saying, "Oh, it's okay. They're having fun." And I'm running around the yard yelling and screaming, trying to grab my dogs, looking like an idiot. And there was something that started going into slow motion. And I started thinking, look at him. He's calm and he's quiet. And I'm the one running around screaming. And so I don't have any power over him, but I do have power over me. And my program kind of clicked at that moment. And so I walked over to him and I said, "You need to leash your dog." That's all I said. Now we had this little saying in my program, and it's say what you mean and mean what you say, but don't say it mean. So I was, a little bit on the edge of the don't say it mean part, but it is progress, not perfection. So as soon as I said that, he leashed his dog, and my dogs came straight to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that was really surprising to me was how much courage it took for me to ask for what I wanted.
Mm.
He didn't ask me if it was okay. He didn't seem concerned that my dog was running the street. He didn't seem concerned that my little dog was being run over, And so if I want to keep myself safe, I have to ask for it. If God tells us to ask for what we want from him all the time. And so it's a really good practice. And if we want our addicted loved ones to learn to take care of themselves, it's really important that we model that, because our children aren't really good at listening to what we say, but they're always watching what we do.
Jean, I was especially struck by the line you said that at that moment the program clicked, that step in the program clicked. And, I think that's something that, we live in a world of people want to see immediate results, immediate gratification, and so on. And so I'm sure that, some folks, when they start the 12 steps, they start the program, they're thinking, okay, well, I went to that meeting, I don't feel any different, and I still have the same urges. And I heard what that first step or the second step or third step, but it's just not taking. But does this happen often to people, that they sense that it clicks in at moments, at very unexpected times?
I think so. I mean, every person is different, and everyone, has a different situation. But for many of us, it seems so overwhelming when you walk in the door for the first time. There's so much to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But then, that it kind of seeps in, without you noticing it. And before you know it, you're really proud of the changes you're making, because your life gets better little by little, one step at a time, literally.
Well, it makes me think of a couple of things. One is, my friend Gary Jansen wrote a book called Micro Shifts,
Hmm.
about how we change our lives, one little shift at a time. And it sounds like
Hmm.
that's a big part of the thinking of a 12 step as well. I think the other thing too is there's a lesson to be learned for all of us that our prayer lives, our lives of worship on Sundays, that very often the message that we're receiving is stored away, but
Hmm.
then it clicks at another time. And I have found that in my own life of prayer. I think it surprised me the first few times that it happened because again, I was thinking, well, I pray and then I should feel different. I should something different should be happening, but I don't feel anything until a week later, and then something happens, and like you said, the moment clicked, the program clicked, the prayer clicked. It's like that
Hmm.
aha moment, and so I think there's a certain matter of patience involved in this. Not a
Right.
certain matter. I'm sure there's a lot of patience involved in this, waiting for the dividends to, start to show up in terms of the hard work being put into the program and seeing results in your daily life. And I'm sure that takes a lot of courage and perseverance to continually be striving for that, because as you said, it's always a process. It's not a matter of, okay, I'm done, I'm
Right.
healed. It's that we're
No.
always in recovery. Any
Right.
thoughts about that?
We don't graduate. That's what we say in my 12-step
Okay.
program. There's no graduation day. It's
Yeah.
uh, it's just a continuous process because we live in and for relationship,
Mhm.
and as long as we live, we have to work on that if we want it to be a living, breathing thing, or else it's dying. We're going away from relationship, and that's what brings people to the rooms most of the time to start with, or it's what brought me to the rooms. So,
Mhm. Well, speaking of relationships, that brings us to the third category that you felt was very important to talk about. And you've already hinted at this, but you can lead us a little deeper into it. The way that we see our image God and image ourselves is going to affect the way that we see others.
right.
And so give us your insights on this and your story that you'd like to share.
Well, this really is like the house that Jack built. The way I see God reflects on the way I see myself. And if I can see myself, if I see myself with a lot of hurt and through a lot of fear, then in turn the way I see others is going to be filtered through those hurts and fears. But if I can heal some of those things, then the way I see others is going to be the way that, you know, I, s- I see through God's love. I can see others as children of God. I can see others as made in his image and likeness too, but if I'm hurting, I don't see them the way that they are in reality. An example of this is I might have a tiny addiction to kitchen gadgets. And so I work at Williams Sonoma seasonally every year and just at Christmas. And I work with some people there, and there's a new crop of youngsters in there every year. And one year there was a young man, and I'll call him Ryan. And he was not a happy camper, and he would swear and throw things and play headbanging music, and he was just really hard to be around. And I had some of this work where I was really starting to see, God's love for me, and I could start to see him a little differently. I could start to see other people. And so I remember praying a little prayer: Lord, show me this young man the way you see him, show me who he is. And so, um, one of the things that I did was I just tried to see beyond the swearing and the throwing and the tantrums. And, over time, over that 6-week period of time, um, he became my friend. He missed his parents. He'd moved to a different city. He missed his mom. He liked hanging out with us women. He became my friend. He wouldn't let me pick up heavy things. And in the past, I might not have been so charitable. I would have probably done my own eye rolling. I probably would have steered clear of him. It was just one of those things where I wonder what the power of love will do. It wasn't me. It was, me allowing God's love to flow through me. And that's what I learned heals your family, is when you can make room in your life for God to flow through you. That CCC 221, the eternal exchange of love. If I can if I can clean up the mess that's within me so that more love flows through me to others, that's what heals. And that's what changes things. And it changes me. So,
Thank you for your stories. They're very powerful, and we appreciate you sharing them. And, I think this notion of seeing others, it's going to be a good segue into one of our last thoughts here before we get to Q&A. And by the way, if you have a question, go to the chat and put that in, because in just about 3 or 5 minutes, we're going to begin some Q&A with Jean. But the segue I was talking about is you talk about seeing others, and you alluded to, seeing others as God sees them, and that would seem to be one of the core concepts of Ignatian spirituality. And a
mhm,
big part of what you're writing here in your book is bringing those two realities together, the 12 steps and the Ignatian spirituality. So I'm going to ask you to expound on that in a moment, but I did want to share very briefly. Your story reminds me of an experience of my own when I was a teacher, and I had a student who he didn't care for me, and I'll be honest, I didn't care a whole lot for him either. He
mhm,
just made it very clear that he wanted nothing to do with my religion class. He'd roll his eyes, close his eyes, put his head down on his desk, and I just thought to myself, what a loser this kid is, and I can't get through to him, and so on. And then my best friend, who was teaching in the room next door, he finished his class, he came over, and he's always one for a big hello. And I saw him enter the room, and I thought he was going to turn to me with this big hello. And he looked right at this student and gave him that big hello that I always expected. And this young man lit up all of
mm,
a sudden. And I thought, what does my friend Jack, what does he see in him? And so I tried to see him through Jack's eyes.
mhm,
And I think that's, what this notion you're talking about, healing the way I see others. We try to see through God's eyes, and sometimes another human being
mhm.
is the model for us, that they seem to see through God's eyes, and we want that, and we need that as well.
Right, right. Well, when I first, when we first found out about my son, I was always worried about, how do I love him when he's doing things that are hurting himself?
Sure.
If I love him, is that me saying it's okay what you're doing?
Okay.
That was always the fear, and I think it's a fear of many parents. And a friend gave me Greg Boyle's book, Tattoos on the Heart,
Mm,
and I read how he loved those gang members. And,
mhm.
I used that example in the beginning until I could, feel it for myself, of how to love unconditionally, because it doesn't come naturally.
You're absolutely right. And, I think in many ways, the whole notion of seeing as God sees doesn't come naturally to us. That we're human beings, we're not God, but we have the potential to be divinized, to become more like God. And this is what we strive for. And this is at the heart of Ignatian spirituality. So tell us what you've seen about the marriage between 12 steps and Ignatian spirituality.
Okay, so under the framework of the 12 steps, I believe, the first three steps are about healing my relationship to God. And of course, in Ignatian spirituality, ask you to look for God in all things. That was the first thing I started doing, just taking note of nature, of kindness of someone, and those would go on a list of where I found God that day, and that started to replace some of the things that I'd grown up with. We all have that person that says something similar to God won't like it if you do that. And you start to form this idea of God that is not who he is. And at least for me, that was the case. And so I had to replace that. And that took a little time. So God in all things, the principle and foundation are about reminding me that I'm not God. I was made for him, and not the other way around. In the past, I was really good at giving God a lot of instructions. I told him what I wanted and when I needed it by and how I'd like for him to do it. And, you know, I'm made for him. And so I had to switch around and ask for, a way to learn to grow into asking God for his will. I had to get brave enough to ask that for his will for my life, because that
Yeah.
took some time. So the next relationship is my relationship to myself. And, in the first week, you talk about confession, and in steps 4 through 7, we do a fearless and searching moral inventory. So you look at what is, and you look at those character defects. And I always think that they're born of fear. That I know that fear is not of God. So if I really, really keep working on that relationship with God, that's going to help me with self. And then the last relationship is a relationship to others. I try to make amends where amends are needed. In the maintenance steps, step 10 is exactly the examine prayer. I mean,
Mm.
it's a daily inventory. That's exactly what it is. But there's other ways of prayer, the colloquy, and the imaginative contemplation is huge for me. It just really helps redefine some of those frightening images that I had of God. But for parents that or family members that have someone with an addiction, probably one of the best tools is the discernment of spirits, because you're making life-changing decisions about your loved ones. And so to know that you're doing it well, you need a guidebook, and there are plenty of those out there. I used God's Voice Within a lot. That was one of my favorite ones. It helped me through a lot of tough decisions. So there's a lot to be said for both programs supporting one another in the healing of families.
Well, and what I love about your approach, Jean, is that it's all about healing and the 12 steps and Ignatian spirituality. And I think it's so helpful for us to know that spirituality is about healing. I think too many people think that spirituality is about, right and wrong, and
Right.
following the right things and doing the right things. And at the bottom of all of this is the admission that we are dysfunctional. A
Right.
friend of mine has put it this way. He said that he actually does this in relation to receiving the Eucharist. He says the reason that we receive the Eucharist as Catholics is because it's our admission that at our deepest level, we are incapable of sustaining ourselves.
Right.
And that seems to be the very wisdom of the 12 steps and of Ignatian spirituality, that at our deepest level, we are incapable of sustaining ourselves. And so we turn to a higher power, and that higher power is waiting there to bring us healing grace. And that's good news. I think we often think that healing power is waiting there to judge us, to condemn us, to punish us, and so on. And what we're learning from 12-step spirituality is that God is waiting there to welcome us, to heal us, and to bring us back to life.
Right. Well, one of the things that I kind of felt after working the 12 steps and studying Ignatian spirituality was that, maybe God gave us the commandments not to say, don't do this, but well, I mean, of course, don't do it, of course, but because he knew that when we do those things, even though they're going to hurt others, they're also going to hurt us. And
Right.
out of love, he doesn't want us to be hurt either. And so the more I work on that relationship with God, the more I see things in a different light. And I think that's important to know, is that he is so loving, he doesn't want us to be hurt.
And this is what you bring out in your book, Jean, and I encourage people to acquire the book. Helping families recover from addiction is such a much needed book at this time. And we left some time for people to ask questions. And I turned to my colleague Denise, who has been behind the scenes here, and she is keeping tabs on the chat. And so Denise, do we have some insights or questions that people would like to ask Jean to respond to?
We do have some comments and questions. So the first one is, how do you respond to newcomers who say they have had a bad experience with religion and struggle with the concept of God?
Well, that's a good question. And it happens more than you can imagine. We had a man come into a meeting room one day, and he walked in and he said, I don't believe in God. I've had enough of that growing up, and I don't believe in God. And some of the women that had been there for a number of years said, that's okay. Do you believe that your chair can hold you up? And he said, yes, looking rather confused. And they said, well, let that be your higher power for today.
Oh,
And it was a beautiful moment, because all they wanted him to do was just to believe in something other than himself. And really, that's a pretty important place to be, is because most of us go in there and we have been our own higher power, because that's why we that's what's brought us to the room, is that we've kind of edged God out. We use a lot of acronyms in 12-step world, and ego is for edging God out, which is pretty appropriate. But when that man moved out of state, the day before he left, he came to a meeting, and he wanted to express gratitude for the group. And he pointed at the lady next to him, and he said, I didn't believe in God, but because you do. And then he pointed to the next person, and the next, and the next, all the way around the room. He said, because you do, there might be one. I think there might be one. And so there is power in just being love for others. You don't have to change anything in anybody else, but God can.
thank you, Jean. What else, Denise?
Thank you. Jacqueline wants to know if you have any thoughts on detaching with love.
Yes. Detaching is a process. You can put up a boundary, and a boundary is not a wall. A boundary can be moved as needed. It's takes a lot of courage to detach with love. I realized that you don't have to be mad to put a boundary in place. That took me a number of years to learn. But in my own situation, there came a time where I had to say, you can't live here. I love you too much to watch you hurt yourself. And before I would have said in anger, you need to get out. But instead, if you preface it with love, I can't watch you kill yourself. I can't. I love you too much. And not everybody has to start there. It can start with little things. No, I can't let you use the car. It's too dangerous when you're drinking. I love you too much to have anything happen to you. But start where you need to start and pray about it. Every single decision you have to make, you need to pray about. And then wait. That's the best advice I can give you.
Thank you, Jean. I think we have time for at least one more.
Okay, Mark asks, well, first he shares, as someone in recovery for nearly 20 years, there are two principles that I have learned that are critical to healing: letting go of resentments and holding on to gratitude. And then he goes on and says, Jean, please comment on this from your own journey.
Oh, resentments. That's a big one in 12-step world. I heard an AA speaker that just really gave me a lot of insight into resentments. When we do a 4th step inventory, we make a list of all the people institutions, places that we might resent. Like some people resent the church, some people resent their parents. But you make a list of those resentments, and then you try to boil it down to what fear did each of those things invoke in me, because fear is at the root of most of all of our problems. So fear and faith can't live in the same room. So you work on that. You work on that foundational relationship to God. And you do make the list. You do practice awareness of what is. You listen to your intuitions. Is that God telling you to pay attention to something, to learn something about yourself, to learn something about a past hurt, about a past fear, that sort of thing. And gratitude is an important balancer for resentments. Also in 12-step world, that if you resent somebody, they'll tell you to pray for them for 21 days. And that doesn't change them most of the time. It changes you. So, if you've got a program, keep working it, keep being grateful, and don't sweep the resentments under the rug.
Jean, thank you so much for responding to those questions. And I know we don't want to let you go or people go before you've had an opportunity to share some resources that you think are very helpful. So can you tell us a little bit more about what we see on the screen?
Yes, the first one is if you need a spiritual director, and both the 12-step program, they ask you to get a sponsor. Ignatian Spirituality, they ask you to look for a spiritual director. I have both, and it's beneficial. So that's the first link. The second link is Al-Anon. The third is AA. There is also an NA link, a GA link. There's all kinds of A's. You just need to put it into a Google search, and you'll find the appropriate link for whatever you need. And if you're looking for a recovery retreat, you'll find them in most all Jesuit retreats.
Jean, we can't thank you enough for the wonderful wisdom that you shared with us, the honesty, the courage it has taken to write this book, and then to go out and talk about a real life situation that you are learning from and helping others to grow from. So thank you so much for sharing with us. We could listen to you for a lot longer than this 1 hour, but I guess we have the book in the meantime until we get a chance to hear you again. But thank you so much, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, and thank all of you for joining us during this time. We would like to wish all of you the very best. Take the advice that you've heard from Jean and take it to heart, pray on it. We at Loyola Press will be praying for you. Many people joined us today because they are dealing with challenges in their own lives, in their own families. And we pray that the Holy Spirit will bring healing to all of your situations. Please know that you can find Jean's wonderful book, Helping Families Recover from Addiction, at Loyola Press. There was a QR code on your screen if you'd like to scan that and go right to the book. There is also on your screen the web address, store.loyolapress.com. There is our 800 number, 800-621-1008. Where during working hours, you will always speak to a live human being. And then a reminder once again that this recording of this webinar will be available in just a couple of days at ignatianspirituality.com. So once again, thank you, Jean. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Thank you, Denise, for your assistance. May God bless all of us and fill us with his healing power today and for always. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.